Whenever we hear terms like modern audience or global audience, or even companies trying to attract a wider audience, I instantly wave the red flags because that generally means that they are moving away from what made their companies and products successful in the first place. And that exact thing now seems to be happening with Atlus. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, this unfortunately has happened with a lot of Japanese companies over the years where they will completely change up what made them successful and popular in the first place because they're trying to chase global standards, they're trying to chase a wider audience, and that is always extremely worrying because the reason why Japanese games and entertainment got popular in, let's say, America in the first place was because it was unique, it was special, it was different. But when they just chase Western standards and the market, that means they're creating the same slop that other companies are. Look at what happened with Forspoken and Square Enix. They made a game for Western audiences and it completely and utterly failed. That studio was shut down months after its release because it did so poorly. And now it seems that the Persona and Metaphor director is saying that Atlus RPGs must attract a wider audience. We've seen it happen with a lot of different studios, and all of those studios have failed epically. Will this be the same situation? I hope not. I love Persona. A lot of Atlus games are really good. I enjoyed Metaphor. It wasn't quite on the same level as Persona for me personally. It was still fun though. This right here will always be one of the best Persona experiences, at least in my opinion. But it says it feels like Atlus is at a bit of a crossroads. The long-standing Japanese developer behind hit RPG franchises like Persona has been relying on the same kind of formula for decades now. Even when it attempts something new like 2024's excellent Metaphor ReFantazio, it still falls back on the Persona-style design that rocketed the company to its current heights. And it's almost like this journalist is roasting them for this, or trying to almost say that it is a negative that they've stuck with this formula for decades. I personally don't think it is. If you are making money and you are seeing people be happy with what you're creating, why change it? As it turns out, though, Persona and Metaphor director Katsura Hashino is well aware of the potential dangers that comes with staying strictly in your lane. I think it's okay to create a brand new, totally different experience that is outside of your existing established series, or it is a spin-off in that. It's like with Final Fantasy 16. I personally loved FF16. I thought it was great, but it was very different from the other Final Fantasy games. If that was a spin-off and a side title, it would have done amazing. People would view it totally differently, and I think a lot of people would have loved it. But because it was a mainline entry, there was a lot of skepticism, a lot of disappointment. I understand turn-based is what I love most in Final Fantasy, though I think that people would have been a lot nicer to the game, let's say, because it does have a lot to offer. Though, yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy just isn't Final Fantasy anymore. In an interview with Game Informer, he stresses that Atlus's future is all about finding ways to evolve our JRPG and what it looks like, more so than just latching on to a specific genre of game. We're going back to how we can evolve our JRPG and what it looks like. For us, it's coming to a turning point where we want to really take it to the next level in terms of how JRPGs are. But that's not to say Atlus will suddenly pivot to something that's completely different for the sake of it. He continues, of course, we want to retain our strengths, whether that be our narrative or elements that make us JRPGs. So what kind of change is he actually looking for? Well, as much as hardcore fans may not want to hear it, he does mention accessibility concerns, suggesting that more could be done to bring Atlus titles to a wider audience. With these changing times, we do feel the need to update our format and create games that would be more widely playable, not just within the JRPG realm, but something that would be easier, more accessible for a wider audience. We're hoping to update our format with that in mind. And this is extremely worrying, at least in my opinion, because whenever we hear terminology like this, or we hear people admit that they want to reach a larger audience, that typically means dumbing down experiences so the most amount of people can experience a product. And that could be age ratings being lower so a younger audience could play it. That means dumbing down extremely hardcore elements of games so more people could play it. Toning down things like difficulty would be like if a Dark Souls game went to having like difficulty options, for example. That's just not what people would expect, but that would mean they'd reach a wider audience. And I want to have faith in them because they have made so many amazing games. And I definitely would not say that they are the worst company in the industry now. It's not like they've been as sort of corrupted by like ESG and DEI dollar chasing, because like Square Enix, for example, is one of the worst in Japan. But this doesn't sit well with me, and I don't think it's going to sit well with a lot of people. And a big question I have here is if he just means the mechanics of the title, or if he also means the story. If we are going to see these traditionally dark Japanese themes toned back and scaled down, if we could see political correctness being shoved into these games, or if he's simply talking about mechanics and maybe a little bit of design choices and things that could potentially not ruin the entirety of a game. And like I mentioned, I think that Square Enix is the worst culprit of doing this. They had created Forspoken, which was supposed to be for an extremely large, wide, broad audience. That totally failed. It was dead on arrival. And Final Fantasy XVI was also marketed as appealing to a younger audience, and that it was supposed to bring new fans to the series. And I personally thoroughly enjoyed it, but I did still have some criticisms, though this didn't work out very well for them because Final Fantasy XVI sales fell short of expectations. Initial momentum was in line with expectations, but the game failed to reach FY goal as its momentum slowed. No updates from sales numbers, the last announced at 3 million, which this was in 2024. In 2025, they have been pretty quiet on this game, except for in that investor presentation that was like 100 pages long, and they mentioned that, yeah, it just wasn't received extremely positively. And you also have other titles of theirs that were not in line with expectations either, like Foam Stars, though Final Fantasy XVI was a disaster on PC. The last time we heard about it, Final Fantasy XVI extremely underperformed on PC, and it had sold only 289,000 units since launch on the platform. And now that Square Enix has moved to multi-platform releases, sure, maybe things can go better for them again in the future. FF16 just didn't have as much momentum behind it as I think that they were expecting, didn't have longevity. But yes, Square Enix is a company that is struggling right now, and they've actually fired a lot of the people that were working in their Western divisions. They have gotten rid of a lot of people in America and also Europe, and they are seemingly getting rid of activists. And I would say the people that are misleading them as to audience interests, though it's still going to be years before we see any major changes over there. And I want to have faith in Atlus. I do. But when you look at the other company that we had a lot of faith in, Squeenix really dropped the ball. And there are a lot of gamers that are saying, if you're going to attract a wider audience, you are going to lose me as your audience. You want to attract a wider audience, go make a first-person shooter or something like that. Games like Persona cater to a specific specific crowd. They aren't going to have a poll that a COD does. If you want to do that, then just stop being an RPG studio. Yeah, I don't know what their exact goals are. I don't know if they're hoping to get way more sales out of the gate, if they are simply trying to pump out maybe lower quality products at a higher volume that are supposed to appeal to a wider audience. But yeah, titles like Persona are made for a specific crowd. Maybe they see something like Expedition 33 being extremely successful in the turn based game, and they said, you know what, we could do that too because E33 did appeal to an extremely large audience, but who knows? At this point, even if that's not the intention, you'd think PR departments would recognize a wider audience as a potential red flag. I'm seriously tired of the wider audience. They really don't care about their fans 2026 and they are still talking about it. The gaming industry seriously needs to crash, especially those big AAA corporations. Yeah, this proves that they need to listen to their customers more. It's like I say all the time, I criticize these companies on this channel because I want them to do better. If tomorrow the video game industry was perfect and every game was amazing, and a 10 out of 10, I would be the happiest person alive because I want video games to be as amazing as I know they can be again. But if companies are going to ignore red flag terminology like wider audience, global audience, it's not going to be a successful time for them. These words are a death sentence for a franchise. How is evolving the JRPG working out for Square Enix? Oof, in hindsight, I guess it was a good thing I never did buy Metaphor, as it didn't seem appealing to me from the get-go. I liked it. I thought it was fun. I just didn't think that it was as amazing as Persona. They've been milking P5 for years to the point that even the fans are pretty much sick of it. The writing should be on the wall about things going downhill. They will need to run themselves into the ground, and indie devs will pick up the slack, making games inspired by their past ones. And yeah, they need to get the ball rolling with new games. You can milk a game for a little while, maybe like 2 to 3 years, and then maybe a year gap before a new game comes out. But this 10-year development cycle for titles is not a positive one. You get a wider audience by appealing to a certain audience. It's the last thing I wanted to hear before the Persona 4 remake comes out. I rather hope he's talking more in the way of mechanics rather than social commentary and political correctness. Neither are good, but the first has at least a chance of being quality. And yeah, I don't necessarily think that they mean social commentary and political correctness, but at the same time, this could be a complete 180 for them and they could change everything from top to bottom, which would be a catastrophe. So I'll be following this pretty closely to see if he goes into any other interviews, if he clarifies, anything like that. But for now, that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this important and informative, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.